It's the My First Gig podcast, whoa. Sharing stories of first gigs and shows. Comedians sharing their memories. The fun and entertaining, exciting and crazy. With Dwayne Dugan as your host. It's the My First Gig podcast, here we go.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the My First Gig podcast. Sorry, I had to clear a lot of spit out of my mouth. I am your host, Dwayne Dugan, your favourite world famous podcaster, still here, still stuck inside, although we're having some beautiful weather here in Ireland. Hope. Here we are, 4 weeks in, episode 4 of the isolation interviews for series 2 of the My First Gig podcast. Is with none other than Marty DeRosa. Now, Marty is based out of Chicago, Illinois, in the US of A, the Americas, as they say in the States. I've known of Marty for many, many years now. Marty is well known in the professional wrestling realm, which I am a big fan of. If you are a wrestling fan and you don't know Marty, then you might know Marty and Sarah Love Wrestling, the podcast. Wrestling with Depression was an old podcast. Unprofessional Wrestling with Colt Boom Boom Cabana. $5 Wrestling on the Highspots Wrestling Network. And much more. It was nice to sit down and chat with Marty today. Like literally earlier today. This is how it's getting now for me. I forgot that. I just forgot what days were. And I kind of forgot what I was doing. I kind of got back into trying to be a bit productive this week. And I was thinking, right, what do I have to do? Here's some admin. What can I do? And going through emails, I saw an email from somebody that I'd reached out to for a podcast asking what date, and I was like, I'll do it sometime before Wednesday, and I realised, it's Wednesday. I don't have an episode recorded. Had a few recorded, put them out the last couple of weeks. I realised I don't have an episode, so thankfully I'd already scheduled to talk with Marty today, so look, just off the phone with him, and here we are now, recording this fun interview. Don't worry, I'll be on time next week. But that's it. I'm just forgetting what days it is. Forgetting weekends, forgetting the day of the week. It's a very strange time, and I don't want to be talking about it all the time, but obviously, the start of the chat, we'll just be chatting with how Marty's getting on during all this. But then we get into the comedy chat, and hopefully that's a nice break for you. As I said, it was nice to chat to somebody involved in the professional wrestling world. He hosts a podcast with his girlfriend Sarah Shockey called Marty and Sarah Love Wrestling. Shout out to Sarah for setting up the podcast. And I mean like the equipment. She came on before recording, letting us know that Marty himself does not set up his own podcast equipment. Let it be known. Let it be known. But guys, yeah, check out Marty and Sarah Love Wrestling. Wherever you get your podcasts. A lot of great merch there is on ProWrestlingTees.com. And on Patreon you can support. And as well, in these weird times where us comedians cannot do shows in a little 7 degrees or 6 degrees or 2.5 degrees of separation, whatever it is. Marty actually made his professional wrestling debut a couple of years ago at WrestleCon, which is the big convention that sits alongside WrestleMania in whatever city WrestleMania is on, and then all these wrestling promotions from all over the world come together, put on these great shows. But I think it was on the WrestleCon Super Show. He teamed with his comedy buddy Colt Cabana against Joey Ryan and his partner of Dublin's own The Session Mutt Martina, who hosted a crazy edition of the old TV show Blind Date on a cherry comedy show that we did in conjunction with OTT last year. OTT being the big Irish wrestling promotion. It was a lot of fun. I'd like to do that again. I say it to Marty that, I'm very envious that he's managed to squeeze in comedy and wrestling in together, which is something I'd like to do, When this is all said and done, I'm going to try and merge my wrestling and comedy ventures into one. And by wrestling ventures, I mean the fact that I sit at home and I watch it. I haven't spoken about wrestling before on this, so if you're a wrestling fan, hey, welcome. Tweet me at Dwayne Dugan or at My First Gig Pod who your favourite wrestler is. Give me a match to watch. Send me something to check out. Right now, though, for you to check out, I recommend Marty DeRosa discussing his first gig way back when. So guys, sit back, relax, slip into a bubble bath. Don't slip, you might hurt yourself. Slide into a bubble. Just get into your bubble bath very gently. If you don't have a bubble bath, use a sink. And sit back and listen to My First Gig with Marty DeRosa.
I'm doing all right. It's just it's been interesting because I told Sarah, and I don't know if you've ever felt this, every once in a while I'm like, what if I didn't do comedy anymore? What would that be like? And I never wanted to take time off because I felt like I would lose gigs and lose momentum. But now the world has kind of been like, now you're going to get to see how that is. And like right away I was like, oh yeah, I don't like this. I would still rather be performing. So it's kind of like a Twilight Zone episode come to life.
Yeah, I'm like a recovered comedian now. It's been a month and 2 days.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get shaky.
Yeah. And I see, are you doing any like Zoom shows or anything like that?
No, I've seen a few and it's not my thing.
Yeah, me too. I'm just going to use this as a little vacation because I was talking to my buddy last night and he's a comic also. And it was like, I don't exactly know what comedy is going to be like when we get started. Like not in a like, oh my God, will there be jokes? But like, stuff that I was working on before this, I don't know if that'll fly anymore or just it's kind of like those things about like, I don't know, just everyday life is kind of different now. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, that's it. Like even in respect to just jokes, like, when you try and get a little bit of sympathy on just some little dumb idea in a joke.
Yeah.
No one's going to care no more. Who cares? It's like...
Yeah. And I mean, and if people like, I'm sure you've gotten this too, where people are like, well, I bet you got over an hour's worth of Corona material. It's like, does anybody want jokes about this? Or there's going to be people who are like, tell jokes about this. And then there's going to be other people who are like, how dare you tell jokes about this? So it's going to be like a real weird situation.
At the Edinburgh Fringe last year, you couldn't move for Brexit shows.
Sure.
There could be a great Brexit show, but it didn't matter how good it was. No one wanted to hear about it anymore.
Yeah. That's how it was with Trump here. After a while, people are just like, man, I'm at this show to not hear about this shit. Like, if we can please not talk about this.
Yeah, like the word alone just becomes a turn off, and I think that's going to be the same now.
Yeah.
Although there's going to be people just dressing up as the virus next year.
I'm looking for sexy coronavirus costumes next Halloween.
That and Tiger King, isn't it? That's the pair.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's it. Yeah. At least we don't have to hear people opening their sets with "Hello, Crazy Kittens" or whatever it is.
I haven't watched it. I'm aware of it, and I was telling somebody else, I was like, it's going to be so nice to not have to hear everybody's dumb Tiger King joke. And it's like, I've had so many of those jokes where it's like, I'm not super big on like all the new TV shows or whatever, and it's like, I'll sit in the back of the comedy club and someone's doing their perfectly crafted Tiger King joke that's very funny, and everyone's laughing, and I get it, I get why it's funny, but I'm just like, I'm still not going to watch it. I don't want to watch it. I'd rather watch old pro wrestling or horror movies or something.
Yeah, I think that's where I came across you years ago, was true wrestling.
Yeah,
like you've seemed to done the perfect thing of being able to merge your career into your hobby as well, and that's very, very nice. I'm very envious of it. In the wrestling world, you're known now as a comedian as well. What's that like, being such a big fan as well?
I mean, luckily, I sort of was able to. Yeah, it was like I was a comedian who liked wrestling, who started making it, through my podcast and through other stuff, and now through this thing, it's like wrestling's the thing that's keeping me afloat because through our podcast and Patreon and stuff like that, and it's become where I, more of my sort of business is the wrestling, which is wild. Like I never thought watching all that wrestling as a kid or watching all those, shoot interviews before I'd go to bed every night was like going to pay off. And now it would be like a big part of my life as far as like, this is not just a hobby. It's like a job now. So it's pretty wild. The people who just do comedy, I don't know how they just don't get so sick of it. But again, these are the people that are like doing the Zoom shows. Like, I don't know, like part of me is just like, God, do I not love comedy as much as all these other people seem to like love it? Like I'm fine being like, I'm just going to take this as a break. But to be able to like my favorite weekends before all this shit happened was I would have like a show at a club on Friday. And then I'm calling a wrestling show here in Chicago on Saturday. That was my favorite weekend when I would have wrestling and comedy shows.
Oh, it sounds fun. You actually had, I don't know, was it Mania a year or two ago? You had a match with our very own Session Matt Martina.
Yeah. 2 years ago, me and Colt took on Martina and Joey Ryan in a match, which was super fun to do.
Yeah, what was it like getting in there?
So I backyard wrestled when I was a kid because in Indiana, we had backyards and all this stuff. So we bought a wrestling ring off of an old wrestler, and we had it set up in our backyard. And we would do these wrestling matches and film it and put it on the public access channel. And so I knew how to wrestle a little bit. And then when we did the match, I was so nervous though. And like when Colt Cabana and I do comedy shows, he's always like, what are we going to do? I'm like, we'll just figure it out when we get out there. You know, kind of like in wrestling, they say like, call it in the ring, meaning like, we're not really going to have a plan. We'll figure it out when we get out there. And that would always kind of be like, at first he was like, oh God, I just want to know what we're doing. I'm out of my element a little bit. So when we were doing the wrestling match, I was out of my element, and it was kind of interesting where I was like, what are we going to do? And he's like, I don't know, let's figure it out. And I was like, oh God, this is nerve wracking. And then we kind of went over everything. And it was kind of like, if I could liken it to comedy, it was sort of like when you are doing like when you have like your hour or the current set you're doing or whatever, no matter how much time it is, and you're just kind of like, all right, I start with this. I talk about my relationship, boom. Then I go into therapy, and then I talk about this, and then I end with this story. And it's like when you're doing a show, and you're like, okay, I got the light, so I know I've got 5 more minutes. We're going to launch into this last joke, and then we're out of here. And it was like that with the wrestling match, where I was like, once we did this one move, like during the match, I was like, it's over. Like I know what I have to do, and it's all over. Like the hard part's over. It was like such a fun thing.
It's like getting the first laugh, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, that worked, so now we're okay. Not like, yeah, no matter when, like you could know these jokes are good, but if you're doing a new club, you're just like, are they gonna like me? Maybe there's something about this city where they don't like me.
Very impressed that you guys had your own ring. Like we did backyard here, obviously, as well. I think everybody did. We just had a little corner of a field, so like having your own ring. I can't even imagine that. What was your backyard name?
Tommy Jobber, which was like a playoff of Tommy Dreamer. And we had first we had a trampoline. We were Trampoline Championship Wrestling, TCW. But then when we bought the ring, we became Tri-Town Championship Wrestling, because our town there was 3 towns in our area called the Tri-Town.
If I say to you, before we talk about your first gig, if I bring you right back to whenever it is, if I ask you your first memory of comedy, what comes to mind for you?
I think as far as comedy goes, it would be watching comics on like the late night shows, like the Tonight Show or Letterman or whatever. More than that, like I just remember watching them on TV and kind of being like, oh, okay. I don't really remember the first name I really remember with stand-up comedy is Rosie O'Donnell hosted a show on VH1. And that was like the first time, because I remember seeing it on the Tonight Show and being like, oh, that's different. They're not playing music. They're just telling jokes, which I thought was very strange. And then I remember that VH1 had this like stand-up show they would play all the time during the day. And I would be like, oh, this is that thing they were doing instead of playing music. And then it all started to make sense to me.
What about actually experiencing live comedy in person then? Would you have seen it much before you started?
I saw it a little bit before I started. I went and saw, I think Jim Norton was the first comic I saw live. And I was like, it was very eye-opening and revealing. No, actually, I'm trying to think who the first. It was either Jim Norton or Bill Burr I saw first. But it was very eye-opening and very much like, oh, this is like, because I had always heard of the comedy club in Chicago, but never went there. And then I finally went there, and it was much smaller than I thought it would be. And just the whole, seeing like a host or like a guest spot or a feature stumble through their set and being like, oh, not everybody's awesome at this. And it was just really eye-opening.
And so, yeah, so obviously, like, if you're going to like Jim Norton or Bill Burr, you've got an interest in comedy. So what would have drawn you towards stand-up comedy before you got to see it?
My older brother was like big into comedy, like Saturday Night Live, again, like Letterman. Like I remember when we got a VCR, he would always record Letterman and I would watch it. And my brother was 9 years older than me. And if he laughed at something, I remember not getting it, but being like, why is this funny? What about this is funny? But then there was stuff that I thought was absolutely funny. And then I remember watching a lot of like SCTV would be on reruns on like Nick at Night, like Nickelodeon. And I was really drawn towards like that and Kids in the Hall. But then once Comedy Central came out, when it was just I think it was the Comedy Channel at first, they played a lot of stand-up. And that's when I just was like, oh man, that other stuff's great. Like I love Kids in the Hall. I love SCTV. I love old Saturday Night Live. But stand-up, I was like, this is what I really like. And then when I started realizing like who the better comics were, and I would, go to the library and I would rent like Andrew Dice Clay's cassette tape and Rodney Dangerfield and Richard Pryor and stuff like that.
So obviously, you're immersing yourself in it. I'm guessing that's what kind of made you want to give it a go. So this was something you loved.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When did you decide to give it a go?
I waited a long time. I didn't start doing it till I was like either 30 or almost 30. And I finally just decided to do it. And I did the research, and this was before, podcasts that let you know how it goes, or websites or things like that. It was still kind of like, I don't know. Like, I remember asking people that did improv, and they're like, I don't know, you got to go to an open mic, and the listings are in the newspaper. This was pre when everything was online. And I was like, okay. And I remember I went to an open mic a couple times before I went. There was an open mic by my house, and I would go watch it a couple times before I finally did it. And then one day, I think I was just like, I'm going to do this. And then I did it. And then I didn't do it for a little while. Then I, got drunk and told my friends I'm going to do it again. And they all came. So it was sort of I would dip my toe in and then wait a little while, dip my toe in and then wait a little while.
And would you consider that first time at the open mic your first gig?
I mean, I guess you could say that's, to me, it's like your first gig is when you get paid.
Sure.
So I wouldn't consider that. It was kind of funny though, because when you asked me to do this, I was thinking back, and I remember the first open mic I went to, or one of the first, might've been the second. This guy who put on all these shows in Chicago was like, oh, great job. And like, that was your first time. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, or second time, whatever. And he's like, oh, that's pretty good. And I was like, oh, thanks. We were just talking or whatever. It was probably terrible, but when you're young, you think you're good or whatever. And I thought he booked me for a show the next night. And I was like, well, this is pretty easy. I just did one open mic and I'm already booked on a show. Like, this is great. And I remember I went to the bar, and it's funny because I walk past that bar every once in a while. And whenever I see it, I kind of laugh to myself, because I thought he had booked me for the show off of one or two open mics. And I walk in, and the guy is like, oh, it's like $5. And I'm like, nah, I'm on the show. And he's like, oh, okay. And then I kind of like went up to the guy, and I'm like, hey, what's up? I'm like, and he's like, oh, thanks for coming. And then just kind of walked away. And I was like, oh no, I'm not on this show. He just invited me to come watch the show. And I felt so mortified. And I kept looking at like the doorman kept like pointing over at me. And I'm like, oh no.
Did you have to pay in the end?
No, I didn't. I didn't get to pay in the end. But I thought, I'm a comic. So, if I do shows, I let comics in for free. So I thought I didn't feel as bad.
2 shows in, free show. That's a success.
Hey, I mean, I thought that was a pretty good batting average of like, I did 1 or 2 mics and I'm already booked on a show. I thought, well, this is going to be real easy. I'll be on TV in no time.
What's the name of the open mic?
The name of it was called the Edge Open Mic.
The Edge Open Mic.
There was a guy who ran a bunch of open mics back in the day here in Chicago.
And yeah, so you're heading down there, you see it a couple of times. Like, when you go down, I guess, is that like a traditional open mic, kind of sign up on the night kind of job? Yeah,
just sign up that night or whatever. And it was interesting because I still, and I don't know if you noticed this, but like, can you spot people at shows when you're just like, oh, you're checking this out to see like this is something you want to do? Can you spot them in the crowd?
I'm not sure. So like you see the people who hover. Like I run a night, and you see people who could have come up like the way they hover, kind of at the break.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you guys do breaks, yeah.
And then they come up at the end. You're like, oh yeah, that's that guy. He wants to know what the story is.
Yeah, I can always kind of spot them, and I was that same guy. That's why I can always spot them, and I always talk to them because I could tell they're kind of like, huh. And it's like, first, if you come to a comedy show alone, that to me is a little bit of a dead giveaway. Sometimes people are just in town for the night, and they're just like, no, I'm just checking it out. I'm doing business in town or whatever, which I get. But every once in a while, and I could tell, and it's like, then you see them at one show, then they're at another show, and it's like, oh, okay, you've sort of made some decision in your life that this is something you want to try, and you're scoping it out. And I always tell them, I'm like, don't just go to open mics and start performing. Don't like scope it out too much. Like, you're never going to be ready. You're never going to be like, oh, I've written these jokes on my lunch break at work and I'm ready to go. It's like, you'll never be ready. You got to just start going to open mics.
Yeah, it's like, you can't practice anywhere else than on stage.
No, there's no practice.
So yeah, you're heading down a couple of times against your own advice. Now you're scoping it out.
Sure. But I had to learn, yeah.
Sure, yeah. Like, do you go down that first night with stuff in mind, or do you see it and then go, right, I'm going to go prepare stuff and come back?
I think that I would also at this time, I was a delivery driver, and I would have Sirius or XM. I had XM satellite radio in my car, and I would listen to a lot of the stand-up stations, and I was listening to, Opie and Anthony was a big radio show back in the day here, and I would listen to these comics talking, and I started kind of like jotting down ideas. So I think I had some ideas. I definitely had ideas and quote unquote jokes when I went to my first mic to perform.
And how do you write jokes when I guess you've never done it before? Is it purely like, I guess, mimicking what you've heard before and trying to make your own version?
Yeah, I think it's like mimicking what I've heard or stuff I've said to friends that was like, oh, they seem to really laugh at that. Like, I think I'll jot that down.
Did you start doing that thing where you start talking to friends and you're starting out and you're doing a few open mics and they know you're doing open mics and they just stop and they go, "You're testing out material on me now, are you?"
Oh, I hate that. I hate when I talk to if I talk to a comic and they, I think, are just talking to me as normal people and then go on stage and do it. I will give them such a fucking a harsh review of that. So I'm like, you fucking talk to me. Like, I just think it's so gross. Like, I love just giving people shit for that. And then like, if you were just like, hey, what do you think about this? And then you went up and did it. But if you were just like, if I was like, hey, Dwayne, how's it going? And you're like, well, the other day I woke up and my arm hurt. And then you did a bit about it. I would be like, oh, that is so gross. I can't believe you did that.
Like, yeah, going to these open mics. Do you remember any of the comedians from the scene at the time that you started to see that you know now today or you got to know?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of the one in Chicago that I would go to. There was a lot of guys, a lot of performers like TJ Miller and Kumail Nanjiani, Pete Holmes and TJ Miller and stuff like that. Those guys were all kind of the cool guys around town when I first started going to shows.
TJ came over to a festival here a couple of years ago. We have a 4-night festival here in Dublin, and it's a lot of American comics come over.
Mm-hmm.
By night 4, none of the imports were standing, and TJ's still running around.
Oh yeah, from all the drinking and partying and stuff. Yeah, in Chicago we drink a lot. For whatever reason, we drink a real lot in Chicago. It's one of those things of like, you know, sometimes comics will come to town and then all of a sudden they're just like, Jesus, everybody here drinks real bad and eats real bad. So it's a fun place to be.
That first night that you went to go on stage, did you know you were going to go on stage?
I did. I had note cards ready to go and I was flipping through them on the bus. I was ready.
How many times had you gone before this? A couple of times, couple of weeks?
Maybe, yeah. And then, so I went to this like big popular open mic, but for my first one, I was very strategic. I went to like one that I heard was like a little off the beaten path.
You didn't want to be like too exposed, I guess.
No, I was like, I'm going to do this, figure it out, and then go to that big open mic and just blow everyone away. That was my plan.
Tell me about the night. Like, so what's the open mic look like? You know, you arrive, you sign up. How many acts are we talking on a show?
Very poorly attended bar show or bar, you know, open mic. And it's now changed owners. It's a different bar, but it's by Wrigley Field where the Cubs play. So I live in that area. So I'll walk past this bar as well often. It was low attended. And I remember there was probably like maybe 15 comics on the lineup, which in Chicago is pretty small for an open mic.
No way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Usually there's like 40.
Oh God. 8 would be a big show here.
Yeah, no, in Chicago, sometimes these mics can start at 7:00 and go till 2 a.m. Some open mics here have actual audiences that come, and most are just comics. Yeah.
So yeah, you got about 15 people on the show that night.
Yep.
Whereabouts in the night are you?
If I recall properly, I probably wrote my name down right in the middle, which seems like all these are just like the most basic new comedy thing. You know, it's like, I'm going to go to a smaller open mic. I'm going to go in the middle, not towards the beginning, not towards the end, like probably early middle.
So you'd seen a few people.
Yep.
You know, you're going up soon.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you're feeling as you start seeing other people and you realize, right, okay, I'm about to follow one of these?
You know, I think what would happen, and I'm still like this with shows where it's like, if I see somebody who's doing really well, I'm like, oh no, I don't know how to do that. And then if I see somebody doing really bad, I'm just like, okay, get me up there. I think I can fix this. But like, if I see somebody just do like, especially like if it's like a really great, well-written joke and the crowd's laughing and there's callbacks and everything, I'm just like, oh no, I don't think I do that. Like I just somehow tell myself like what I do is different and not as like perfectly crafted as that. And I start getting in my head.
Do you remember any of the jokes you told that night?
Oh my God, I think I did. So I had note cards and I was going to make a joke about how I'm a pothead and I can't remember anything. And I was gonna, as I read the note card, I was gonna throw the note card after each joke. I thought that was gonna be so funny. Which I realized that's just what Letterman did. He would throw his note cards around. So I was just like, "Oh, you unoriginal hack! What are you doing?"
That's how your whole career started now, off the back of that.
Yeah. But I did have one joke. I had one joke that I thought about the drummer from Def Leppard only having one arm, and I thought that was like a pretty decent joke at the time or whatever. And I was like, it's not a bad joke. That was like what I consider my first joke, like how I used to have long hair and I cut it, and I sort of used that as a time reference sometimes. Like if somebody would be like, was that in 2000 or 2001? I'd be like, oh, that was in 2000 because I had my long hair. And I did a joke about if the drummer from Def Leppard does that, about like, well, it was probably 82 because I had both of my arms.
Comparisons. Yeah, that's a structured joke already.
Not a bad little joke for a new boy comic.
How did it go that night? Did it go well?
In my head, I think it went okay, but it probably was terrible.
But that's it. No, like I think if it went bad, you'd know it went bad.
Yeah, because I had some that, like, I remember. Oh man, and I still to this day I love when I see it because it happened to me. When you bomb so hard, you walk right off the stage and right out the front door. You don't talk to anybody, and it's just like, fuck this. I'm never doing comedy again. Like, no one here I'll never see any of these people again. So it doesn't matter. And you just get in your car or get on the bus or train and you're just like, fuck this. So I had those.
And you said you took a break. So like you went once and then that was it. You like, what was your thought?
Yeah. Like I didn't, again, this was before like podcasts and everything. And it's like, I feel like now if you want to get into comedy, there's so many documentaries and podcasts and things and books and stuff online that you can get the idea of, oh, okay. And yeah, you do the same material. You can work on the same material week in and week out. And I thought like, well, I did those jokes. I'll have to come back when I have new jokes. And I just didn't know the deal,
Yeah.
And, or it would just go either just okay or bad. And I would be like, well, I'm not going to, torture myself by doing this. It's like after a hard day of work, I'm going to go, sit in a bar for 4 hours and just wait to go up to just bomb. Like I was just, I don't like looking back now. I don't know how I had the drive and determination to do it, to stick with it. Because normally everything I do is just like, fuck it. Like I've always just quit everything. And I don't know why I stuck around doing it.
What were you doing at the time? You said you were a delivery driver, was it?
Yeah. Just family business and just making deliveries and stuff.
What was the plan? Was there a plan or was it just kind of...
Dude, no plan.
No?
Nah, no plan. Like, no. Like I was just floating through life. No plan.
And at what point did you start to think, right, this could be it?
I think I just started like seeing the same people. It was funny because I'd never really worked out and I started going to the gym a little bit a couple years ago. And it was like the same thing. It's like you keep going, you see the same people and it's a head nod. And then it's, oh, I'm actually talking to this person. And then somebody goes, hey, instead of this, you should do that instead of that. Oh, okay. And then you like start learning. And I just started meeting the same, I would see the same people around and then, drinking and stuff like that. You're chatting more. And then all of a sudden it just became so much more like tangible. I'm like, oh, okay, I could do this.
Yeah. I'm in the club now, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's fun because I had a lot now every night of the week I could go out and, see some people that I enjoyed hanging out with and have some beers. It was super fun too.
So you went that first time, you told some friends, you went back a while later.
Yeah.
Like how long did it take you to, once you start doing this, even just open mics going, kind of, I guess, consistently rather than kind of in and out?
Yeah. Cause I would remember these guys would be like, if you really want to do this, you got to do this like at least 4 nights a week. And I remember thinking, that's just not possible. Like how could I do this 4 nights a week? Like, are you crazy? And then when I don't know, it's just like after a while, I just started like it was all like I'm sure a lot of people, it just like consumed me and it's all I thought about. At work, I'm just writing notes and jokes and this and that. And I can't wait to go do it tonight. And when I really knew I was hooked was when it would go poorly, but I still was like, I can't wait to go the next night to fix that joke and actually make it work. And it was like, that was just like, oh, I'm in. Now I'm consumed by this.
Because you said a second ago, if it didn't go well, you'd be like, oh, well, why would I want to do this? And then
yep.
There's obviously a light bulb moment somewhere that happens and going, right, this is it. This is...
Right. Or you get off stage and somebody goes, hey, you didn't say, that you used to do that. if you go on stage and say that you used to do thing A, when you do the joke, people will actually laugh at it. And it's like, oh yeah, and then you're listening to the tape and you're going, why didn't I go up with more confidence, or why did I waste time talking about this thing, And then it's just a matter of like, okay, now I want to put this stuff to actual use. And it just becomes like, so addicting.
And it sounds like, there's, I guess, a difference between, maybe wanting to do it and caring about doing it.
Yeah, sure.
Would you get nervous in those early days?
Oh yeah, for sure. Very nervous.
How would you combat that?
Slamming beers. I'm slamming beers. I'm getting high. Like I'm self-medicating. I'm getting ready.
Just distractions almost.
Just, yeah, whatever I can do to make my brain calm down a little bit.
While you're in that mode, if we could take you back today, 5 minutes before you meant to go on, the guy before you was on stage,
yeah,
and you can pull yourself aside and have a little chat, what would you think you'd say today to the Marty back then?
Oh, don't worry. Literally nobody but you will remember this day. There will be people here that you will become friends with who will not remember you or remember you going up at this. So you have absolutely nothing to lose. It doesn't matter. And it's just about getting reps in. And if I could equate it to wrestling, I would be like, this is day one of wrestling school. Nobody ever years from now is going to go, I don't know, you didn't do that body slam right the first day of wrestling school.
Isn't that just some nice advice? Like, that last question, I hope people know this is for, like, aspiring comedians who are either thinking of starting out or who are, like, in their first year or so of comedy wondering what to do. And this is all about comedians who have put in the years, put in the hours, and their advice back to you. And that's, look, just have fun. Don't worry about what's going to happen in those early days. No one will remember. Like, I'm going to tell you a little story now. I'm not going to tell you too much about my first gig. But on my first gig, I did so bad. I thought it was brilliant. Did 13 minutes in when I think we were meant to do 7. And the very next day I emailed the video to the biggest comedy club in Ireland saying, hello, I'm a comedian. Where's my money? So, and you know what? I played there later on and they didn't remember who I was from those early days. So don't you worry about that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining in for the My First Gig podcast. If you're a fan of Marty, a fan of professional wrestling, this is your first time listening, why not go back and check out the archives? Series 2's got some great American comedians as part of these isolation interviews. Todd Barry, Emma Willman, Adam Caton Holland, and today Marty DeRosa, and many more coming starting next Wednesday. If you're from over here in little old Ireland or the UK, some great UK and Irish comedians, Ardal O'Hanlon, James Acaster, Reg D. Hunter, many, many more back in the archives in season 1. Go check them out. I am Dwayne Dugan, a world famous podcaster and a very funny boy, so if you do enjoy listening to me ramble, go follow me at Dwayne Dugan. Be sure to follow the podcast at My First Gig Pod not wherever. We only have a Twitter, a Facebook and an Instagram. Go check out those. But if you want to listen, go to myfirstgigpod.com to get some links to where you can listen, or just search it wherever you get your podcast and you'll have a lovely little old time. Go follow Marty online at Marty DeRosa on Instagram and on Twitter. Go listen to the Marty and Sarah podcast, Marty and Sarah Love Wrestling. Check it out, martysarahlovewrestling.com, at Marty Sarah Pod. Go to prowrestlingtees.com, buy a shirt of theirs. Go to their website and buy a pin. You like pins? Yeah, they got some lovely pins. My favourite being the Handsome Boy Championship Wrestling pin. I think that's from Lapel, yeah. Go check it out. Then tweet them. Say, hey, just heard your podcast for the first time. Off the back of hearing you on the My First Gig podcast. Or just tweet Marty at Marty DeRosa saying, hey Marty, heard you on the My First Gig podcast. It was great. Dwayne was great. And then give them all your money. And then just, I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. So if you want to give me money, just like put it in an envelope and send it to Cherry Comedy at Whelan's. Find the address online. I'll take any currency. I don't mind. And yeah, guys, look. Back next Wednesday. Hope you had fun. Thanks for joining me. See you another time. Goodbye.
It's the My First Gig Podcast.